Yogic practices can sometimes be called spiritual practices, and it's part of the reason why I've changed the name of my YouTube from Spiritual Awakening Help to Freedom Technologies, because the feeling is, for me, as soon as we engage in these freedom technologies, and we can begin gaining a bit of a spiritual identity that needs to prove and needs to be right. And so if we're doing that, this might be the video for you. So, what is an identity? An identity is what you think you are. There was a great saying one time, wasn't there? I think, therefore I am. And this was Descartes, I believe, who was a philosopher. But in fact, there's never been much of a less true statement. But it is relatively true. If I believe I am that one in the mind, then by thinking, I therefore become that. And therefore, I is, or I am in the mind. But you're so much more than that, aren't you? You're so much more than an I in the mind. And when a spiritual identity sets in, because we've been doing lots of yoga, lots of sadhana, and we're beginning to blend and blur the lines between physical reality and non-physical reality, we can begin to gain a spiritual ego or a spiritual identity. I think spiritual, therefore I am spiritual. And this is nonsense, because of course we're all spirit incarnate. We're all non-physical energy, one energy that's upholding all of us, isn't it? And that breeds inclusiveness when we recognize, that which is my essence is the same as that which is your essence, and the tree's essence, and the cat's essence, and the alien's essence is all that energy that I am. You're that. That's it. And so therefore the saying maybe should be, I am. And that should be it. Not I think, therefore I am. It's just I am. Because that is what we all are before the I arises in the mind. We are just amness, beingness, here-ness, presentness, isn't it? Now, it's become quite apparent to me, and through full fault of my own, I had been carrying around a spiritual identity for a long time. And the reason we do this, isn't it, is because they're very, very, very hard to see through. But really, it was just exactly the same as the old identity, needing to be right all of the time, needing to know everything and have an opinion on everything, which of course we recognize is not helpful for me and usually not helpful for anybody else whose opinions that aren't based in fact I'm giving to. So in a way, I can see that there's still some work to do here to tie up some loose ends a little bit with this spiritual stuff. Because really, waking up out of a spiritual identity is really more like a recovery. It's a recovery from a trauma, we could say. Now, let me dive deeper into this and stay open or don't, switch off. It's up to you. But here's the way I see it. Samskara. This is a word the yogis use. Samskara is like a seed template stored inside of our what we'll call spine, but it isn't. It's Sushumna Nadi, one of the main energy channels that Kundalini can rise in. So we have this seed that's been planted by a trauma, usually. It can be a positive trauma or a negative trauma. What do I mean by that? We can have a really positive experience that we really love, and that can form a seed inside of us that becomes part of our template, that we then try and recreate that over and over again. This is a samskara, but it's what we might call what we might see as a preference samskara. Okay, just bear with me with these words because nobody's ever used them before. Like preference samskara, people aren't going to know what that means because I'm making it up as I go along. Aren't we all, though? Nonetheless, there can also be an aversion samskara. Again, new word, trademarked. Aversion samskara, of course, samskaras are well known, but being an aversion samskara might come from a wound, a really a not positive experience for us that we have. And then that creates a seed, samskara, that root template, that seed template inside of ourselves that makes us averse to certain things. So we can prefer things from this very deeply, or we can be averse to things from our past experiences from this too. So in a sense, love that synchronistic word, in a sense, innocence. We must come back to our innocence, isn't it? Where we recognize that we don't know anything. Because we don't know anything. We don't know anything. But as soon as we go into separateness, and we all fall for this, don't we? I did it the other day when I made the video, that one that said the end of spiritual awakening help. And I really did believe I was somebody separate there who was going to tell everybody of their change and receive loads of negative energy back. Of course, that didn't happen. But I still believed I was separate. Typical Jamie, believing he's separate again. But of course, this isn't innocence, is it? In a sense, I've gone into separateness, to mind, to identity. And of course, when we're in an identity, first of all, it's not stable. Is it? Because the identity's views and opinions, they're always changing. Always changing. Much like all of life is consistently changing. But there is an aspect of us that has never changed, that has watched this body grow, that will watch this body decay, diminish, and die at some point. That essence that we are, spirit, is always, constantly, ever preserved and ever unchanging. That's why we can witness the changing forms of time, we could call it. So we must come back to that innocence in a way, isn't it? And that is like a recovery, really, because we don't really realize we're in a spiritual identity sometimes, isn't it? Because it's so sneaky, because now it's got a spiritual clothing on. It's in rags, and we've got like what do they call it? What's the word? Sandalwood draped on our face. And that's the identity we're presenting to the world. And it's part of the reason why I wear a cap and just normal clothes, because none of it's relevant. None of it's relevant. The only thing that's relevant is to use the technologies that we can, yoga, sadhana, qigong, or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what it is. They're all doing the same work on our energy, isn't it? To bring us back to that innocence where we recognize my abundance is the fact that I'm alive. My abundance isn't how spiritual I am and how much I need to be right about this spiritual thing and shoot others down for not being right about their spiritual views. And all of this is BS. Belief systems. We're believing things about separateness to be true that are not. And therefore, maybe we could say, I'm thinking spiritually, therefore I'm not spirit in this moment. I'm playing out separateness again. Oh, look at me go. Here I am, separate to the world, separate to nature. And it's like, yeah, cool. But that's going to have to wear itself out too, isn't it? If we're going to go any deeper into the journey. Otherwise, we're just having a thinking awakening rather than doing the real work, which will create a real energetic, pranic awakening through the nervous system so that we can hold on to larger quantities of that non-physical, semi-physical energy into the body that feels nice, isn't it? You know it. You felt it inside of yourself. But of course, as soon as we go into an identity around that, the energy becomes diminished somewhat. So I suppose, in a way, here's to our recovery. And it really is a recovery because it's like an addiction, isn't it? We're addicted to that separate sense of self in the mind, spiritual or otherwise. we're addicted. And we get the small hit of, yes, I'm alive, by buying into it. But my word, is this a poor exchange or a poor investment? Because what comes with that hit, that high of going, yeah, I'm on my own kind of thing, is the negativity that will come with that. One who is truly awakened is neither involved in high or low, because there's a center point in which all highs and lows are experienced. We must go beyond trying to get spiritually high on ourselves, on our ego, separate sense of self. I hope this makes sense. I hope it didn't feel like an attack. It's just, we really are zero. Nothing. One practice you can try if you're finding that this might be you is be nothing. What does that mean? It means even when the thoughts come, be nothing to them. It's like, imagine a carrot being dangled in front of you. Well, if we bite that carrot, very tasty, then the carrot moves, doesn't it? You know that stick that holds the carrot in this? We're always constantly chasing this. And we realise this is a never-ending journey where we never get the carrot. We might be able to bite it, ooh, a little bit of sweetness, but we never really get the real thing. And like Coca-Cola said, you should taste the real thing. And they've never got anything right, really, have they? But apart from that, we should taste the real thing. And the real thing isn't on a running machine chasing that carrot, because you'll never get there. It was always and always will be here, where you've always been, that the real thing is. And that thing is no thing. But no thing is still something. Lots of love. Namaste.